One thing we run into constantly are people trying to take some shortcuts and not actually fixing the code to make sure that it works for all screen readers. Have you seen much with some of these, we call them overlays or whatever, where people go out and spend $100, $400 on this piece of software thinking that it makes them self-compliant and they're still being sued?
Yes, I have seen that. I have seen that. The overlays, where they think they're in compliance, they put an overlay in there. The person that does it says the reader is done right, but then when you push a little further, you find out that in fact it's an overlay. The reader isn't reading it. There are glitches, and the plaintiff is actually right that there was an attempt to fix it, but it wasn't purely fixed because not all the readers were able to read it in a proper standpoint. And that happens. That's a shortcut. It costs less money, but it may end up costing you more money in the long run because you aren't in compliance.
And do you have any experience, and have you seen any of these, what we call overlays, or kind of like these quick fix companies that people fall victim to and they're sued with them? Are they doing anything to have any ramifications back to those people?
People who use the overlays are still getting sued. And not only are they still getting sued, the website will say, or the complaint will say, the website used this overlay and it does nothing to help me because it just changes the screen. It doesn't change the code. So if the code's not changed, yeah, you can do certain things, but it's not going to make it compatible with JAWS because JAWS is going to be interacting with your coding. So I think it's doing that is better than nothing. But I've seen complaints that say this overlay actually caused me more difficulty because it interfered with even the visual presentation of the screen. And it also wasn't WCAG compliant. And so while I appreciate the effort from these companies to do that, the fact that they're selling it as this is going to make you compliant, it's a lie. It is an absolute false statement. It does not make you compliant, and you will still be sued.
Are there things that you have seen that were in place with efforts that were taken to try to bring things up to WCAG standards that have kind of bore out as things went forward?
The only thing that will really be a defense for you is if you're truly WCAG compliant.
Okay.
It is a coded website that is maintained and updated with the current guidelines from the World Wide Web Consortium. That is the only defense that you have, because if that's the recognized standard, right? So it's like so in federal court for construction related access claims, it's a 2010 ADA design standards. So that's the standard. If you don't comply with that, you're not compliant. You're not meeting your responsibility.
Glenn, I have a question for you really quick our guest just heard those very large numbers that they can get hit with those lawsuits. I think hearing it from a lawyer and the numbers that are actually happening, when someone goes in to get their website fixed, we've often said that, sometimes it's cheaper for them to just start all over again. What is it that you're doing outside of the WCAG that a lot of people don't understand that's making it compliant? Is that reader thing that Bruno was talking about? Is that what you are doing? That's like what you're doing to help them that maybe some of those buttons aren't doing that we talk about? What is that?
Yeah, the only way to make a site truly accessible is to do it at the code level. So when you have a screen reader, the people that built screen readers used a different language than what most websites are out there. That's why 98% of websites right now are not accessible, because you have to not only understand your typical HTML and CSS, you have to understand some things called ARIA, which I think is HTML 5.7. You have to understand semantic HTML, so that, like Bruno was talking about, when you have an image there, you have to paint a word picture. But you also have to understand the way a screen reader peruses a website, kind of like you or I would have perused a newspaper and looked at different titles or different headlines. If your headlines aren't structured properly by using semantic and by using ARIA, then you're not going to be able to use the screen reader properly. So it's the only way that I know to do it is to do it from the beginning and to make it completely accessible so that it works for everyone, regardless of their, ability or disability. Because you may have someone that's blind, but you also may have someone that's colorblind. And if there's not enough contrast between the foreground or the background and the text, then they can't read it. And I mean, 9% of us men are colorblind by the time we're 50. So you have to kind of make sure you understand the entire scope of different disabilities. You have to make sure that it covers, the current stats we're seeing are somewhere between 1 out of 5 to now maybe 1 out of 4 people has a long-term disability. And even though most of the lawsuits are talking about blind people or about deaf people, you still have a lot of people with MS or MD that can't navigate a mouse. So if they can't navigate a mouse when they come to your website, especially like an e-commerce site, and they can't purchase, well, you're losing that percentage of that little disability and this percentage of a disability from becoming a client to conduct commerce. Along those lines, there's some of us have been talking about this a lot for the last couple of years, Bruno, and it's really seemed to be top of mind this year. And there was actually an article on NBC News just last week about people that are blind, advocates of people that are blind, really going after these overlays that not only don't correct everything, but more often than not provide other types of obstacles. Are you hearing much about overlays and things like that in the suits that you're seeing with regards to website accessibility?
I hear a little bit about the overlays. I mean, I'm not a technical guru when it comes to this stuff, but they do talk about, well, you may have done this, but the reader doesn't work. And therefore, what we're reading, you may have put this in there and it may work under your system, but it really doesn't work under his system. So he or her system, so they can't see it. So as I understand and been educated, that some of these measures that we think could have been done and were stopgaps really don't take care of the issue. And I haven't had to dive in it so deep to really test it, because ultimately we were able to settle all those issues on the websites, because most of the website stuff I've had, the settlements have been so low that we were able to get it done. But what I made clear to them is they needed to get a real expert that can go through their website and make sure that the issues are compliant, and some of them invest in that and some of them don't.
And I think what business owners need to, I'm sorry.
That's all.
Well, I think what business owners should understand about this is at some point, people that are filing these lawsuits are going to communicate with people that do what we do online. And what most people don't understand is how techie and geeky you can get with this is each of these little overlays creates what's called a footprint. So we all have a lot of us have tools we work on lines to, when you know a footprint, to put something in a computer, and then all of a sudden, boom, we know every of the, whether it be 10, 100, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 websites with this little piece of code on there. And now for people that are serial litigants, they can simply go after all of these because they know that this, from precedence, isn't accessible. And now we have a target to start suing people. So sometimes doing something that you're not completely familiar with can provide a lot more harm than good.